But thanks very much for joining us today. So this is the first of a series of webinars where we're actually going to be going through elements of the snake, that journey to investment readiness. We're launching the toolkit for investment readiness as a pilot, probably at the end of October now. It'll be a website, and I'll show you a bit of it in a minute, just to give you a flavour, but we are going to have a proper session in a couple of weeks that will walk you through it in more detail. But we wanted to take a session on each of the milestones and invite NERF 1 participants and maybe even NERF 2 participants to come and share their learnings of that milestone. So today we're going to look at milestone 1, which is initial project scoping. And to walk us through that in a moment, we're joined by Laura Angel and Holly Story of the Swinton estate, Melodie Manners of Cornwall AONB, and Tammy Smalley, Green Investment in Greater Lincolnshire, otherwise known as Giggle, and her colleague Bethany as well, and then having a few technical issues while they're off-site today. So we're hearing from them at the moment, and really the purpose of this webinar is to share learnings from those projects on how they carried out this early stage scoping, such as how did they engage with stakeholders early on, how did they assess buyer interest, what technical assessments did they have to carry out, how did they get a rough gauge of cost. So looking forward to those today. I just thought before we start, I'll just share with you a bit of a screenshot, so a bit of a preview of what the toolkit's going to look like. And then Phoebe's going to just sort of tell you a bit about milestone 1, which has been built out a bit more, and some of the, give you a sort of sight on some of the information that we're going to be including to help projects as they're moving through this initial milestone. So I will attempt to share my screen. And as always, please just, this is very informal, so feel free to put up hands and write in the chat. We'll sort of let each of the presenters present, and then we'll come to a good solid time for lots of questions and discussion. We also want to hear from you as well. So hoping, can you see a screen?
We can.
We can, brilliant. That's great. So this will be the Investment Readiness Toolkit. It will be a website you can come on and interact with. There'll be a sort of an introduction about what it does, which I've basically just given you. It's obviously intended for any project developer or enterprise that's wanting to restore or create natural habitats in the UK, with the use of private finance to get through, to sort of understand their journey and ask all the questions they need to ask and be able to answer them. So this might be familiar to you. This is a snake I've been talking about for a long time, and this is the investment readiness journey as we see it. So there'll be content on each of these 8 milestones, and then also content on community engagement and policy and regulation. And then you'll be able to click on one of the milestones and see considerations that Phoebe's going to show you in a minute, and then also a series of case studies. And those joining us today have been very kind, and they'll be their case studies will be appearing within the toolkit and will be open to many more. And then it will just talk about investment readiness. This is just the intro page, but I thought it'd be nice for you to sort of see what we're talking about, explaining what is investment readiness versus being prepared to just sell to a buyer directly. And then there'll be an opportunity to feedback and to share your case studies. And we have some acknowledgements that we haven't got approved yet at the moment, so I won't linger on those, but I wanted to sort of just give you a flavour of what we're doing. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then Phoebe is going to just sort of share about this initial project scoping, just to frame up some of the considerations and the sort of challenges that projects need to address in this very first step of the journey. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Helen. So hi, everyone. My name is Phoebe Tucker, and for those who don't know me, I am a Nature Associate at the Green Finance Institute. And as Helen said, I'm just going to be giving a quick 5-minute overview of the Milestone 1 content that we've developed so far, and to give a bit more insight into the level of detail we've gone into. So if I can get the slide to move on. Very good. So milestone 1 is what we call initial project scoping. And it's, to be honest, it's been a really interesting milestone to capture in terms of the scope of content. Sorry, that's my post box going. Yeah, the scope of content that project developers have to cover in this initial step. So wide range of questions they have to ask. And so this milestone is all about stepping back and really making sure that PDs understand the land that they want to use, what they can do with it, what's the best type of land use change, and the possibilities in terms of funding and financing the project overall. So yes, you'll see this infographic at the top of every page, and we're really keen to maintain that as the navigational aspect of the toolkit throughout the site. So moving on, what you'll see when you are in initial project scoping, and of course across all the milestones, is what we call the bookcase of content. So within each milestone, we have a set of considerations, and there's about 30 considerations in each milestone. So to make this a more digestible and structured way of learning, we just present them in terms of high-level themes. And as with the wider content of the toolkit, you're not obligated to go through these themes in any particular order, but we thought we'd present them here for ease of learning. So yeah, the considerations are within each theme, within this bookcase navigation, and I'll now go through the content, the specific considerations that you'll see. So milestone 1, the first theme is really assessing the current state of your site. So what the land is currently used for, what its history is, does it have any social or recreational significance? Those are all really important questions to ask when you identify a site, to make sure you have a really good understanding of its current state. And to give an example here of one of the considerations, we ask, is the size of my land relevant to having an investment readiness project? Because speaking with project developers, what we've noted is scale is often needed to deliver a project at scale enough to attract private investment and private finance. That said, small areas and in certain nature-based projects can be of small scale, for example, wetland creation and nutrient reduction. So we thought that was that question of scale is really important to include early on. Next one is determining appropriate land use, and where the previous theme was all about assessing the current state of the site, this one is really about scoping the potential and the future state. So is there a need to restore existing habitats or for new habitats to be created? What habitats and assets are connected to the site that could provide potential synergies? And really a big question that we've noted a lot, again, in talking to project developers, is the question of how this site fits into the local or regional nature recovery strategy, and what existing partnerships and initiatives are going on in terms of nature recovery. So catchment-based approach, CARBA, local nature partnerships, rural land use partnerships, they're all really important for project developers to be aware of in order to build their thinking about the best use of the site in terms of ecological changes. The next one is the legal ability to change the land use. So really this is all about your ability. What is the land tenure structure? For example, are you working with an owner-occupier? Is this an estate owner, or are there land managers in place who would be who you need to consult with heavily? An interesting one in terms of legal ability is the permits and planning that you might need to enact the ecological changes you want to bring to the project. So again, to use the example of a treatment wetland, we learned that you need a very particular permit to deliver, to get permission to change the site and build a wetland. And this can take up to 18 months to deliver. So that really affects a project's timeline. And it's really important, therefore, to get a view early on when you're designing your project of how long it will take to get permits and planning, along with any other legal obligations on the site that you need to address. The next milestone is, the next theme is feasibility of attracting private finance. And this is all about your market research. So what revenue models can you use to work with the land use change? For example, are you going to sell nutrient credits or biodiversity credits? Or are you going to set up a fixed payment structure? Might you be working with sustainably produced commodities that you can sell alongside maybe carbon production, anything like that? That's really important to get a good sight on early on. And then, of course, the very an intrinsic question is, are there beneficiaries that will pay for the project? So at this stage, you might consider doing a beneficiary analysis to really map out who benefits from the change in this land use, who's going to benefit from the project, and who would have the capacity and the willingness to pay for those changes. And then finally, it's feasibility of funding a project. So in the toolkit, we make a very key distinction between financing and funding. Funding is very much in this context for the project's development. So it can take years to develop an investment readiness project, and you need a lot of man hours or staffing hours. You need ecological surveys, you might need specific engagement with buyers and sellers that would cost money. So what costs are going to be incurred in this development phase, and what sort of entities might be willing to pay for these early costs, and how can you offer them a return? What other things can you offer them to motivate them to help you develop this project in terms of the funding? So those are the considerations, and really whistle-stop tour, but I really want to dedicate some time to talk about the case studies that we want to use, because these considerations, as you've seen, are very high level, and we've designed them to be high level so that they're applicable for all different types of nature-based projects, whether you're planting a new woodland or restoring peatland, or setting up a community-based project that restores natural capital. Whatever it is, those considerations, at least most of them, will be applicable to the project. But to bring those considerations to life, what we've done is we've gone out and we've interviewed a series of project developers about their case, about their journey to investment readiness. And the case studies that you see in front of you, they're just a sample of those project developers who have very kindly dedicated their time and resources to letting us write these case studies and featuring them on the site. And so, as Helen said, each milestone will have a set of case studies. Some of these case studies will run through the snake. So you'll see, for example, on the Wyre River NFM project, that runs throughout the snake. So you can see their entire journey to investment readiness. And these have been really great for testing the content of the toolkit and making sure that we're building something that's fit for purpose. So we hope that people will read through those and get actual specific examples of what their challenges were, what they didn't expect, how they surmounted them, what resources, what partners were really key for them to surmount these challenges, and what best practices they developed. And this is just an open call to say we're still writing the case studies, we're still refining the content from our conversations with project developers. So if anyone has any, if you're looking at the milestones of this toolkit and you think that you have learnings to share, or you want to talk about your project on this toolkit, then please feel free to email us and get in contact, because we would love to hear from you. And I'll just stop there. Helen, have I missed anything?
No, and to be honest, we've got a session specifically on the toolkit in a couple of weeks, so we'll go through in a lot of detail there. This was really just to let you know what we're talking about today, which is milestone 1. So with that, I want to leave lots of time for people here to sort of share from their own experience. And I just wanted to also give a caveat. It has taken years for some of these projects, but we hope it's speeding up, and actually we'll get it down to not long. So I don't want to scare anyone who's at the early stage thinking they've got years and years ahead. There's a lot of successful projects. We've found them all in the case studies, and there's some here today. So with that, I just wanted to invite Tammy. Let me see if she's, I can't see if she's here. No,
Hello,
having
can you hear
you are here. Brilliant.
me,
Thanks,
Helen?
Tammy. Hi. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. And so just to start off, for those who don't know, would you mind just giving us a little bit of a summary about Giggle?
Yeah, sure. But firstly, apologies, everybody. Apparently, rural Lincolnshire's 4G is playing up, so I may disappear. So Bethany Newark, our Giggle officer, might have to pick up. Sorry, Beth, to dump on you, but rural Lincolnshire is not playing ball. So I'll turn my video off to try and stabilise the connection. So green investment in Greater Lincolnshire, Giggle for short, always like an amusing acronym. Basically, it covers the historic county of Lincolnshire. So it's a very large geographical patch from the Humber in the north down to the Wash in the south, and across to our county borders with the likes of Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire. We have 10 local authorities within that area. We have a two-tier system where we have a county council and district councils, but we also in the north of the county have unitary authorities of North East and North Lincolnshire. So it's complicated in regards to administrative boundaries. In the early scoping for this project, basically it came out of multiple activities of working across the area. So we hosted 2 of the DEFRA ELMS tests, working with land managers from across Greater Lincolnshire. I established, working with the local planning authorities, the Biodiversity Net Gain Task Group for Greater Lincolnshire, where all the local planning authorities are involved. We have farm facilitation groups. We have the catchment partnerships of the various rivers. And we also have a lot of industrial partnerships, such as the local enterprise who run various thematic groups, but also up on the Humber, we have Catch, which is a local industry partnership covering both sides of the Humber North and South Bank. Plus we have 2 nature partnerships in Greater Lincolnshire, the Humber one and the Greater Lincolnshire Nature Partnership. So between all of that activity, we gathered information from suppliers, such as landowners who can provide ecosystem services, from facilitating bodies, be that the local planning authorities or the catchment or nature partnerships, through to the buyers of any ecosystem services, be that hardcore industry or housing developers, or even our utility companies such as Anglian Water. And from that knowledge base, and all of those bodies are involved with the local communities, and through delivering training to our elected members across Greater Lincolnshire, who of course live in Lincolnshire, we gathered a lot of information about what those buyers, suppliers and facilitators wanted from a NERF project, and that is a consistent, equitable approach across Greater Lincolnshire. And that's how we scoped out the project, put the application together by forming a task group or steering group. On our steering group, we have Anglian Water, local landowners, representatives from the local planning authorities, the local environment agency, Catch, the industry body, and both of our nature partnerships within Greater Lincolnshire. And we put that application together. We got support letters from industry, from planning authorities, from landowners who want to join the project. And that's how we scoped out the project, Helen, by working across and forming a vision together, which was basically a conference in March where we had roughly a third of land suppliers, a third of facilitators and a third of buyers, where we formalised that vision, which is Greater Lincolnshire will deliver towards the nation's food, Greater Lincolnshire will deliver towards the nation's water, and also towards the biggest programme of nature recovery and net zero for the nation.
Thanks, Tammy. What I think is so helpful about this learning that you're sharing right now of how Giggle worked with stakeholders, it's a massive project. It's just enormous across the landscape with so many different stakeholders. And you've really managed to sort of galvanise them around this vision, as you say, with Greater Lincolnshire for water, for nature, farmers, feeding the nation, or contributing to feeding the nation. And the conference was sort of key in sort of building that vision. Is that right?
Yeah, so the conference basically brought people who, because our project is going to initially focus on 3 ecosystem services of biodiversity, carbon and water credit trading. it brought experts from those fields into Greater Lincolnshire to provide our suppliers, facilitators and buyers with a background to what that might mean. And then we had local people with some knowledge on some aspects of it, be it land ownership or be it council local plans and what biodiversity net gain might mean for them. Which created a conversation because we, or helped inform a conversation because we then asked the delegates, which we were around 80, I think, or maybe it was more, can't quite remember, getting senior, Helen. Basically, we asked the delegates, what do they see as the issues to those 3 ecosystem services markets within Greater Lincolnshire? What do they think the solutions are, and where are the gaps in enabling those solutions? And that has really helped inform how we take the rest of the project forward. And we've got buy-in from a large group across all 3 areas that you need to look at, which is supply, facilitation and buy.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tammy. Fantastic. Well, we'll come back to you in a moment because I want to talk about dive into lessons learned. I'm sure there's a lot of questions that people might have. If you want to put them in the chat, or you can stick your hand up in a moment. But I just want to come to Laura now with Swinton. Laura, for those who, again, for those who don't know about Swinton's project, would you mind just briefly describing it for us?
Yeah, sure. I'm the Rural Estate Manager for Swinton. We've also got Holly Story on the call from GSC Grays, who have managed the NERV project with us. So Swinton Estate, for those who don't know, it's 20,000 acre rural estate near Massam in Nidderdale in North Yorkshire, and it's privately owned by the Cunliffe Lister family. We currently manage just over 1,700 acres of mixed broadleaf and coniferous woodland, some of which is very ancient and dates back to sort of 17th century. But aside from that, forestry operations have historically been focused around commercial timber enterprise. So we produce firewood and chip for our own consumption. We've got 3 biomass boilers on the estate and for timber sales. So the estate's got an objective to increase woodland cover by half as much again over the next 20 years. So that will be another 850 acres, which will bring the total to over 2,500. With the aim also of broadening out the management to include environmental and social sustainability alongside maintaining sort of commercial viability. So our NERV project has been the research and development of the business case for a new forestry model for us, which delivers multi-layered benefits, specifically around water quality and flood mitigation, biodiversity, public access and wellbeing benefits, as well as carbon sequestration, and then ultimately, obviously, the timber value of the wood. But to deliver these multiple benefits, there's obviously an impact on the commercial timber yield. So, for example, if you take a site that has high benefits in terms of limiting overland flow or in filtering sediment, it's probably going to be quite a steep, tricky site to manage. So it'll be harder to access, harder to work, definitely harder to harvest and extract from. So the yield from that sort of site would be much lower sort of commercially. So what we've been exploring is how this shortfall could be made up by private sector investment and finance into the environmental and social benefits of the new woodlands. So an initial 30 potential sites have been refined down through a series of baselining for environmental assessments, and then through a series of consultations with stakeholders and our focus group. And now, as we approach the end of the project, we've got 5 very different sort of cluster sites earmarked for our first phase of planting in our estate 20-year plan. Much of the estate, so of the 20,000 acres, 8,000 acres is moorland, which is triple SI. So of the remainder, almost all of it's tenanted farmland, and we've got a mixture of arable and livestock. But obviously the tenant farmers are key stakeholders in this. So they've been kept informed from the outset, and then individual farmers whose holdings have been affected have been consulted as we've gone along on the design of the parts affecting their own land or their holdings. So that informed how we refined the planting designs, and we've now, the cluster sites that we've got have been evolved into, we've got riparian corridors, we've got agroforestry in the form of shelter belts and wood pasture. We've got extensions to existing woodlands, and we've got, in this first phase, we've got one new block of recreational woodland, which is on the edge of Massam. We've also been engaged from the outset with who we see as our potential customer base, so the buyers, which has also fed into the design of the planting sites very much from an outcomes perspective, and really informed on how and why they might wish to invest or partner with us, which has fed very strongly into our ultimate business model design. Holly, I don't know, is there anything you'd like to add, or have I missed anything? Brief intro to the project.
No, I think that was a good overview.
That's a great overview, thank you. And yeah, I know what I think is, I know you and I have talked about it before, and you just touched on it there, this in the very early stages, how important that role of engaging early with buyers was, because there were sort of learnings that came out of that maybe you weren't expecting. I don't know if you can share a little bit more about how that went.
Yeah. It has been intrinsic to the whole project from the offset. So just in terms of how we did it, there was a kick-off public information event. I think this was before my time, so Holly might correct if I'm wrong, but I think there was planned to be an in-person event, which in the end was cancelled, but there was a Zoom event, sort of information event, public information event held at the launch, which then transpired into a retained focus group from a pool of volunteers that have been with us right the way through the project. So the focus group have come from local and regional businesses, so very much who we see as our customer base. And we've also had representatives from stakeholder groups, from the tenant farmers, I think from Yorkshire Water and the Nidderdale AONB have been involved as well. So we've had in the course of the project, we've had 2 in-person meetings of the focus groups, and we're planning a third and final concluding meeting just as the project's nearing its conclusion now. And they've actually been really good in responding to, we've done several questionnaires and polls in the interim time between meetings on specific queries and elements as the project's gone along. So the market research has been absolutely critical really to the evolution of the woodland design and the business models of the end product. What they're seeking and would be willing to invest in wasn't necessarily as well, certainly as I'd initially expected, but it does mean that we've been able to develop the plans to meet the market requirements from the outset, rather than doing a load of work up front that then turned out not to be quite on point for what the market was after. I think the other key point really is that one of the key questions of the project was to consider the values that could be attributed to the ecosystem services, aside from the provisioning of timber, as to whether they would be enough to offset the reduction in the commercial timber yield from the more diverse sites that we were looking at. So obviously there's publicly available mechanisms to value carbon and biodiversity net gain, but real monetary, I would say worth rather than value, of water quality, flood mitigation and the recreational benefits is a lot harder to pin down. So after visiting 2 of the potential planting sites, the focus group were surveyed on how and what they'd realistically be prepared to invest in those particular sites that they'd just seen. This went on then to inform the business case proposals for both the woodland creation models and the investment appraisal cash flows, which was the crux of the project ultimately, that sort of investment appraisal. So in terms of surprises, I think I was surprised to hear about the lack of initial take-up for the initial information events. So I think the response rate to the initial mail out was 28%, which I thought was quite low. And there were 10 attendees at the virtual session, the first virtual session. But then I think what we've found as we've gone on is very high levels of commitment and interests of those who did engage, which has been on the whole, give or take the odd apology, on the whole sustained through the project. And within those businesses, good levels of interest in the project we found didn't actually equate necessarily to having firm net zero or ESG targets and action plans in place. So obviously that's a really good opportunity for us to provide a local solution. I think probably the most surprising finding for me was that the focus group valued the health and well-being benefits of the woodland to their employees, I think, as much as they did the carbon offsetting potential. So this, as I was saying, from an early stage fed into the design and location of the planting sites. And it also led us more towards the option of a partnership or a sponsorship model where business would have a more long-term relationship with the woodland. And I think they wanted to be able to participate in the planting and development of the trees as it matured. So they wanted to very much have much more of a tangible relationship. So I wasn't expecting that to be quite so strong. And then I think from a strategic perspective, the modelled payback periods for the creation of the woodlands were longer than I thought they would be. Maybe I was a bit naive. I'd initially assumed that the value of the carbon alone would be a complete game changer in terms of the returns, but it hasn't actually worked out that way when you sit down and work through the cash flow. Having said that though, I feel that there's more to explore in terms of realising a genuine premium for the product. So I think what we've got is a brilliant starting point, and it has been incredibly eye-opening. It's been really valuable to do, but I think we've got more to build on.
It's so interesting, thank you. And it just sort of shows if we could have some sort of metric that captured the health and well-being elements, how much more finance you could crowd in as well. But I think it's such a great learning about how really you need to engage with buyers early, because it can help change the design of the project. Thanks, Laura. And we'll come back to you and Holly in a moment if there's questions. I hope there are questions. So Melodie, finally, welcome. Thanks for joining us. There's a lot of people here, so I can't actually see.
Oh, will I come up if I start?
I can see
Helen,
the graph.
hi.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So again, would you mind just giving a brief overview for those who don't know about the Cornwall AONB project? It's got many moving parts, isn't it?
Yes, so hi everyone, my name is Melodie. I'm the Business Development Officer for Cornwall AONB, and I've been the project lead for our NERF project. We actually initially called the project the Protected Landscape Investment Bank, but actually as the project's evolved, we've really moved away from the term investment bank, and so we now just call it NERF. But I think that has been a really important learning for us. What we initially thought the project might be has turned into something else. So just to put the landscape, I guess, into context for everyone, we're the 9th largest AONB in the country, and we're unique in that we have 12 separate sections under one single designation. So for our NERF project, we look specifically at section 8, which is South Coast Western, and that's the Lizard Peninsula in particular. And what we would like to do is model our learning then across the rest of our 11 sections. So our project has essentially been a feasibility study to structure Cornwall AONB to facilitate private investment and blended finance into the protected landscape. And to do that, we've worked with consultants. So we've worked with Terranomics, who are conservation finance experts, Game Consulting and the University of Exeter to determine, through kind of a combination of desktop research, extensive supply side and market testing, to create the offer to potential investors. And I guess that's where we're a little bit different from the previous project, in that because we're not asset owners, we've had to start really with our supply side rather than go straight out to our buy side. And we've looked at ground truth, in part the opportunities for payments for ecosystem services, as well as sort of really exploring the risks and barriers from both supply and buy side. Part of our project has been also to understand if the Cornwall AONB Trust, which is a CIO and independent of the Cornwall AONB partnership, might sort of act as an intermediary, and then again the benefits and risks of this. So our intention has been that through a blended finance approach, we can achieve a significant return on ecosystem service benefits and really serve our primary purpose, which is to conserve and enhance the protected landscape. The habitats we've looked at in section 8 has been enclosed farmland, moor and heathland, freshland and wetland, woodland, coastal margins and semi-natural grassland. So what we're really looking to do is to ensure nature recovery across the boundaries of the protected landscape, because we've got these 12 separate sections, and we're really looking to offer all of our stakeholders, as a partnership organisation, we've got 20 partners within our partnership, and then of course we've got stakeholders who include the farmers and land managers, and we really wanted to make sure that we were able to offer advice and support to supplement the current and future agri-environment schemes. So that's sort of the project in a nutshell, I guess.
Yes, that's great. It's an amazing project, and thanks for sharing with us. One of the, I know Phoebe has been talking to you a lot for the case study for Milestone 1 about some of the sort of early learnings that you had, and I know that you sort of shared with me last week that there was a bit of a expectation about what the ecosystems services that were going to be sold were, where the revenue streams were going to come from, and that slightly shifted in that early scoping. So I wonder if you could sort of share with us more about that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So scoping was really important to the success of the project, and I guess for taking the legacy of the project forwards for development, which is essentially what we want to do. So we've spoken, I know, Helen, about the discovery stage which was a previous project, which was a test trial project with DEFRA, but with the same farmer group. So within that, we co-designed a landscape management framework, and we created individual farm action plans with requested transitions. So we knew really what opportunities we had, and then sort of this has been in the structuring phase, has been analysing that and looking at what farmers would need to be paid to deliver all of that. That was quite large. There were quite a lot of PES transactions within that potential, and so the Terranomics really made an economic case for the supply side in engaging with these PES transactions, and then we started off based on that landscape management framework, looking at woodland carbon code, soil carbon, BNG, catchment agreements and markets, and then also at the sustainable farming incentive and local nature recovery as well, and then we really sort of shortlisted that down to 3, and we knew collectively there was a potential opportunity, and that was really important for making that business case. So we calculated that for every £1 of public money spent, it would generate a £3 return of ecosystem service benefits. But I guess to deliver that, we would really need to look at private investment and blended finance, and to see what extent we could achieve those outcomes. So a good example of what I guess you think when you're working with someone, it's going to be, in terms of farm business anyway, it's going to be finance which really drives decisions. So I guess a good example where that wasn't necessarily the case was we looked, as I said, at woodland carbon code, and we ran a couple of workshops with the Forestry Commission and also the Soil Association. And so to put the economic case into perspective a little bit, I've got the figures here. So a new native woodland can capture up to 400 tonnes of CO2 per hectare per year by year 50. Assuming a carbon price between £7 and £20 per tonne of carbon, which is indicated by the Woodland Carbon Code, this could generate between £56 to £160 per hectare per year. And important to note, Terranomics have stressed to me, is that the Woodland Carbon Code isn't currently linked to the UK emissions trading scheme. So that's the compliance and regulatory market, and used to offset carbon by businesses that are bound by law to reduce their emissions. So it was established in 2021, and in the first 6 months, the prices peaked to £75 per tonne of CO2. So Terranomics has said that if Woodland Carbon Code does become linked to the ETS, then prices based on those assumptions could be closer to £600 per hectare per year. So for our farmer group, that represents quite a significant amount of money per year. And when we did those individual farm action plans, we really sort of cited out where woodland could be created. But actually, sort of when we were scoping and the more work we did with our farmers, permanently taking land out of production wasn't favourable to the majority of the supply side. And it was great in a way, because scoping early really allowed us to sort of move on to what else we could do for this particular group and have that knowledge. But what I think really will be valuable is the development of the agroforestry carbon code as that begins to come through. And I know there's a NERF project with the Soil Association, I think, that's beginning to look at that. So agroforestry and wood pasture, I think, presents us with that real opportunity, and providing the payments are the same, then certainly can achieve those ecosystem service benefits.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's all that upfront work done around woodland carbon, and then the farmers like, well, actually, it might not work at the moment for us. So thanks, Melodie. I'm just going to ask. We weren't expecting so many people to come today. We thought this was going to be about 20 people, which is why we've run it as a meeting. So I was wondering if Phoebe, I don't know if it's even possible, if you could pin Melodie, Laura, Tammy, and myself up, and Holly will add you to the mix, and maybe Bethany as well, just because there could be some questions that people want to ask, and we can also just sort of each sort of share our views on them. If it's not possible, don't worry, we'll just keep it like this. We're just surprised and thrilled that so many people are here. So while Phoebe's seeing if the art is possible, and maybe it's already happening, my computer doesn't know about it, there is a question here from Zoe Smith about have any of you sort of found reliable metrics for some of these wider ecosystem services that might have been mentioned, sort of beyond woodland carbon and peatland carbon, and some of the more common ones at all? I don't know if you can just shout out.
I think that's certainly from our perspective, because it's a lot of these PES transactions are very new in the UK market. Woodland Carbon Code is not only was it an opportunity, but it's also the most established in the UK. So we felt that we could really offer to our supply side as much knowledge of the market as was available. But actually, we really sort of struggled and actually looked to other transactions that were taking place abroad. So in South America and some in Europe as well as examples, because those kind of metrics weren't there. Although I know the biodiversity net gain metric is at 3.0 now, and we did use that tool as part of our project when we were looking at potential BNG sites. That's probably no help to Zoe. Sorry.
Holly, I see you've come off mute. Did you want to share?
I was just going to say we were the same in terms of just kind of looking for those metrics, and it can be a bit of a challenge. There are quite a few kind of online tools and resources that can help with that. And I know, we'd look through the Ecosystems Knowledge Network, have quite a good kind of record of tools that are available. Some of them freely available online, but others not, and some are more accessible and intuitive than others to use, I'd say. So we used Orval on the recreation side, and our biodiversity assessments using the biodiversity metric, which I think we were on 3.0 when we did ours. They were now on 3.1, I think. We also worked with the ICAST team, who are based at Leeds University, and they helped us with some of the modelling for natural flood mitigation and reductions in sediment pollution, and looking at kind of volumes of flood peak and times to that peak and so on, and how that might be reduced with increased woodland cover within subcatchments. So that, yeah, there are things out there. It's just quite disparate at the moment. And one of the things that we did also find with kind of using tools like Orval to put a monetary figure on those services is that then that's kind of, that gives you a value to society, but that's not necessarily the same as what your buyers will be willing to pay. So that's, again, as Laura was saying, where our focus group really came into their own as well in kind of discussing that to them. It did add, it kind of added value from their side, but it wasn't, you know, to the extent that some of the kind of the tools that take a more kind of natural capital approach to valuation, I suppose, you know, it's not necessarily like realizable income that those figures throw out.
Yeah, and just on that, so there's a question here from David Lowe. Let me just read this. It was an interesting comment on expecting that carbon will cover the cost. So this is talking about Swinton again, will cover the cost of woodland creation and management. Could I ask what cost per tonne you were basing your forecast on, to completely understand if you can't?
Yeah, I don't know if when I initially thought about it, I don't know if I'd specifically scientifically analysed the cash flow at the outset. I had thought it was significant enough to make a really big difference. The prices that the business case has been based on are woodland carbon code prices plus the premium that our focus group showed us when we surveyed what they would value the sort of bundled benefits on. So we did find that there was a percentage uplift that they would attribute to the sort of carbon plus model that we're offering. So we've used that effectively, but it's fundamentally based on the woodland carbon code calculations.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and thanks, Holly, for sharing what those extra metrics are. That's really interesting on the flood side as well. Some of those, and obviously then plays into that uptick of the price of carbon, I suppose, that you can charge as well. Tammy, I'm conscious we haven't heard from you, and I just wondered if you might be able to sort of come back and sort of share with us, you know, what have been the sort of surprises that you've had and some of the sort of key learnings, while I quickly scroll through some of these questions and see if we can do a quick whip round again.
I mean, the lesson we learned, which maybe we learn from many projects, is you need a soft start to anything if you're starting from scratch, because resources are tight in all organisations. So, you know, we went out for recruitment for Bethany, who's lovely and in post now, but got minimal applications. So we had to go out a second time to find a credible candidate, which Beth is, which is fabulous. But we need that extra resource to help coordinate the whole project, because we're working across such a large area and so many partners. And I would say the resource in the partners themselves is basically stretched. So it takes time to build in capacity. So we recognise that from the outset, and we're buying in consultancy. There was a lady who asked about metrics. We're going to be developing metrics and are in the process for water and catchment trading, water quality, and also in regards to water resource management across the landscape. So we'll be able to share that towards the end. We're not there yet, but buying in expertise from Entrade, which this NERF fund has enabled, provides the partners of Greater Lincolnshire with extra resource. So the main thing is always plan to not do it on top of your day job, because it's a struggle, and recognise that the UK aren't the only people who are trying to get to the bottom of ecosystem services. And somebody already mentioned about looking overseas. The USA are quite a long way ahead in regards to some ecosystem services, So, you know, I sit on Water Resource East. We've had presentations from America on water resource credit trading. So we're bringing that knowledge into this project. Look beyond the UK.
That's great advice. And then I'll just casually, thank you, just point to GFI Hive's case studies of some international examples. Thanks for teeing that up. But there are some there, it's about 30 of international examples if you haven't seen them already. On the Hive. That was such an interesting point you make about resources and factoring that in. I know that we have the same challenge ourselves. I'm sure most people here do, that you never leave yourselves enough time or it always takes longer than you think to find the right person and get them in post. I've got just a couple of minutes left, so there's a question. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, I'd strongly advise anybody who has teenagers to tell them to go to university and do environmental economics. They're as rare as pixie poo, and there's a great demand for environmental economics.
I could agree more. If I could do it all again. So I'm not forgive me, I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm not seeing any hands up. Maybe that's my fault. If it is, if maybe just interrupt me. Otherwise, I was going to do. Oh, go on.
Oh, just to say, sorry, if anyone, there's no hands up functionality on meetings, but if anyone wants to come off mute and off camera, then they're free to do so.
Well, this is a real learning mouse for ourselves of how to set these meetings up so people can come on and actually speak and ask questions. Well, then what we'll do, and we'll take this learning away from us for next time, is just maybe in this last 5 minutes, we could have a comment from Tammy, Melodie and Laura and or Holly on any other learnings at this sort of early stage that you think, or sort of quick snippets of what you think, or even just summarizing what you think is the key learning you had at this early scope that you'd want people who are just beginning to know. Melodie, sorry to throw this on you, but I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, no, more than happy to. We've been reflecting actually about the key learning points that we've had, because we're literally coming to the end of our project tomorrow. So we've really been thinking about that. But I would say, in terms of putting things together, you know, what you really need from both buy and supply side is certainty that enables you to sort of broker or put these deals together, but that also we've really sort of come to the idea of putting together a creative approach to the offer, as opposed to something which is purely just wood and carbon or soil carbon or biodiversity net gain. And so I'd say to any of the other projects, sort of it's really tough, isn't it? Because there aren't a huge amount. I know you've got the great case studies you're putting together, Helen and Phoebe, and there are more and more things coming through, aren't there? But because it's so early, there aren't a lot of models necessarily to follow. But I think that offers us a huge amount of opportunity to pull together innovative offers that we can really pitch to our supply side, but also to our buy side to really get engaged. Certainly, as Cornwall AONB, in more than just buying the buying and selling of credits, but into things that take into more people, place, nature and climate approaches. So a little bit, but I think that Swinton were doing in terms of the well-being, I think there's a real positive to that. So yeah, embrace the opportunity, I guess, would be the key learning point really for us.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Melodie. Very inspiring and good news, I'm sure, to those listening. This is a key moment. I think it's really exciting to be involved, like in the early stages. It's amazing. Laura, Holly, anything that you wanted to throw into the ring before we wrap up?
I think I would say early stakeholder engagement, literally from the get-go, in terms of buyers, sellers and facilitators, I think would be my main point. Holly, anything different to add?
No, I think exactly what you said, Laura, and also in terms of, I think what you referred to earlier, that local projects and having that tangible involvement with the project can really add value to what you're offering buyers. And I think that the other thing for me, it's not so much maybe in terms of investment readiness, but just a general point. I think we started off kind of very much thinking, we're just going to put the right tree in the right place. That's what we're going to do. And actually that's really complicated, especially when you're trying to target multiple different benefits, social benefits, environmental benefits, and make it financially viable and attractive as an investment for a private landowner. That is, it is really complicated. It does take time. So I think don't underestimate the time that kind of scoping phase can take, but it's really worth it to then come up with something that's you've properly consulted on and you know is going to work. And I think it's also really broadened out ideas in terms of I certainly started off the project thinking of that kind of tree planting target being very much about kind of block planting of woodlands, and now we understand it a lot differently in terms of bringing more trees into the landscape in lots of different ways. So be prepared to have your ideas changed as to exactly what your project's going to look like in that scoping phase as well.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, even as we're working on the content for the toolkit, it's initial project scoping that's the biggest piece. Once that's, and there's so much that needs to go in early, and then the other things kind of flow from that. We were really surprised at how much of our time we were just writing about it. So goodness knows, we can understand what it was like when you were doing it. And Tammy, just finally, you any sort of quick extra learnings to throw in there before we wrap up?
There's a true appetite for it. Ecosystem services, be it the sellers, as in landowners, the interest we are getting from farmers and other types of landowners across Greater Lincolnshire is phenomenal, and also from the buyers. The appetite from all kinds of industry and developers has been quite surprising to me, and it isn't, for both of those groups, it isn't just about money. It is quite empowering and lovely to know that these people also want to do it as part of leaving a legacy to a better planet. And that's what NERF has given me. It has given me some optimism that we're not alone in trying to recover nature and address net zero. So thank you, NERF.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful program. Yeah, thank you, Team NERF, for delivering it. Right, well, thank you so much for coming today, and thanks for bearing it with us with the various technical challenges we might have had today. And thank you so much, Melodie, Tammy, Holly, and Laura, for sharing with us, and thank you to my amazing colleague Phoebe for the great work that she does. And that's it from us. So next time we'll be going to milestone 2, which is going to be how do you work with sellers. So we'll be looking at exactly that point. But before then, we are going to do like a bit of a 20-minute walk through the actual toolkit and go through the milestones, and just sort of so you can see the usability, because we are going to be asking you to give your feedback and pilot it during November before we actually do like a big fancy launch in December. So just to put that on your radar, I would really love your help, and everyone who, so many people have fed in, and we want to acknowledge them all and make this an open resource for everyone. So that's it. Oh, top of the hour, and I'm being blinded by the sun, so it's time to go. And so it's just thank you all again for, I hope you have a lovely afternoon, and thanks very much to our wonderful panel. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.